Hello everyone and welcome to our module on psychosis. Psychosis is a loss of perception of reality, and even though many people associate psychosis with psychiatric disorders, it can also be seen in medical disorders. So for example, patients who have a medical condition and become delirious can develop features of psychosis. On the other hand, the classic psychiatric cause of psychosis is schizophrenia, which I talk about in another video. But in this video, we're just going to talk about psychosis in general, and there are three main manifestations of psychosis. Those three manifestations are delusion, disorganized thought, and hallucinations. Delusions are strongly held beliefs that conflict with reality, and the way you determine that a patient is suffering from delusions is based on what they say. A patient will express their beliefs in their speech, and if that speech conflicts with reality, then that patient is having delusions. And there are a number of subtypes of delusions depending on how the patient's beliefs conflict with reality. So for example, persecutory delusions occur in patients who think that someone is after them. They might say someone is chasing me or someone is trying to kill me. These are evidence of persecutory delusions. Grandiose delusions are things like I am a millionaire or I am king of the world. Erotomania or erotomaniac delusions are delusions that involve someone being in love with them, like Brad Pitt is in love with me or all people are in love with me. Some other types of delusions are shown on this slide. Somatic delusions involve the body, so a patient might say there are worms on my chest. Delusions of reference are when patients think pieces of the world around them are referring directly to them when they are not. So for example, a patient who thinks the television newscaster is talking about me is having a delusion of reference. Patients may also think other things in the world are all about them or are trying to affect them in a way that is not accurate. And then finally, delusions of control are where patients think that their body is controlled by aliens or they think they can control parts of the world or the universe, like I can change the sun. After delusions, the second feature of psychosis is disorganized thought. So let's talk about that now. This element of psychosis is assessed more by the patterns of patient speech than by what they say. What they say determines their beliefs and determines whether they are having delusions. The way they say it is evidence of their patterns of thought, and this is how you can diagnose disorganized thought in a psychotic patient. And there are a number of different subtypes of disorganized thought, so let's go through those now. The first one is alogia. This means speech poverty. Many patients who have schizophrenia have poverty of speech, and this is evidence of disorganized thought. Thought blocking occurs when patients have a sudden abrupt stop while they're talking. So once again, this is a pattern of their speech. They'll be saying something and they'll abruptly stop and shut down. Loosening of association is when a patient is talking and they switch to ideas that do not follow one another. So a patient may jump from one thing to another and it really doesn't make sense. That's evidence of disorganized thought. Tangentiality is similar. It is when a patient diverges from one topic under discussion to another. So the topics are related, but they don't really fit well together. So for example, they start by talking about how they feel and they switch to how the weather makes them feel, and then they switch to how the weather was the day before, and so on and so forth. This is tangentiality, moving from one topic to another and not really staying on topic. Some other types of disorganized thought are shown on this slide. Clanging is when patients use words that rhyme but do not make sense. So for example, if a patient said, the cow said how, he had to bow, this sentence makes no sense, but patients who are psychotic will like the way that the words rhyme together and they will say things like this often, and that's evidence of disorganized thought. A word salad is when a patient uses incoherent words that make no sense, and perseveration is when a patient keeps repeating words or ideas persistently even when they don't need to be repeated. The third and final element of psychosis is hallucinations. Hallucinations are sensory perceptions without external stimuli. So if you see an object in the room around you and that object is actually there, that's not a hallucination. On the other hand, if you see someone sitting next to you but there's no one sitting next to you, you are now hallucinating. You are having a sensory perception, a visual perception, in absence of an appropriate external stimuli. And there are many different subtypes of hallucinations based on which sense is affected. So for example, in visual hallucinations, patients will see things that are not there. And this type of hallucination is especially common among patients in the hospital who have delirium. So for example, an elderly patient with a high fever who becomes delirious may start to see his or her deceased spouse. Auditory hallucinations are when patients hear voices or sounds that are not there, and this is a classic feature of schizophrenia, which I talk about in another video. You can have hallucinations that involve smell. These are called olfactory hallucinations. These occur when patients smell or detect an odor that is not present. And you should be aware in terms of board-taking strategy that this is a classic feature of aura and temporal lobe epilepsy. If you see a description of a patient who smells something and then has a seizure, that patient likely has temporal lobe epilepsy. Some patients develop gustatory hallucinations. These are hallucinations that involve taste, tasting something that is not there. This is a very rare type of hallucination. And then finally, a tactile hallucination is a hallucination that involves feeling or sensation. A classic form of tactile hallucination is to feel insects crawling on your skin when in fact there are no insects on your skin. This can be seen in alcohol withdrawal along with other types of hallucination. And in addition, this is a classic type of hallucination of a patient who is intoxicated with stimulants like either cocaine or amphetamines. And I'll finish this video by mentioning a special type of hallucination that occurs when people are either falling asleep or waking up from sleep. Hypnagogic hallucinations occur when a patient is falling asleep. The word hypna means sleep. Hypnopompic hallucinations occur just before a patient wakes up, and these are a very unusual type of hallucination, and they are both seen among patients who have narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder that I talk about in the video on sleep disorders. And that concludes our video on psychosis.